Hi guys, this is Abdurrahman Gilal once again, and in this video I will try to explain you that how can you write your first program or first web application program using PHP language along with this, HTML, that is hypertext markup language. In order to, develop a web application, it is always important to have this fundamental tools. So so for example, if I wanted to work on any server-side scripting, I need to use the PHP language, and then I need to have some server in order to, receive some requests from users. So I need to know what kind of server is useful for me. And in order to have the database, I need to have some other servers to basically, you know, connect myself with the database. So there are going to be so many things. That's why one of the best practices that a lot of developers do is that they use the XAMPP server. So the XAMPP server actually automatically combines all the necessary items that you are looking for. For example, if you're looking for Apache server, or if you're looking for database like MariaDB, or if you're looking for the compiler like such as PHP and Perl languages. So everything is there. So what you have to do is open source, free of cost. Just try to go to the download, and then in the download you decide which system are you working on, and then you select the system, and then once you click on that, so you have to just follow the instructions, say next, so it will basically give you the application installed. If you're working with a MacBook system, so you're gonna have the environment something like this. So it will come up like this after this welcome. So what you do usually do is that you go to manage servers. So you see we have MySQL database, and we have this Pro FTP file transfer protocol, and then we have Apache server. So you can start or stop any of them. And I basically have turned all of them on so that I can basically look for, my application to, work. So once you have everything is, installed, what is going to happen is that you should go to your applications, and in the application, you're going to go to the XAMPP folder. In the zip folder, you have so many other folders available. For example, you saw me stopping this application right here, so you should just simply write, your file here. So let's say you're gonna find it out, it's open there, and then anything that you wanted to store, you should remember this htdocs, sorry. So in the htdocs, whatever you put is gonna be basically the root folder for you to locate where exactly are you going to perform your services. For example, this is my localhost. As soon as I write localhost and I hit enter, so I get this environment. So it's not to worry to see such kind of things on your screen, because that is the by default setup of your XAMPP. So if you wanted to delete all the folders, such as these all folders, so what you do is that you just simply go and delete them all. So it's just gonna go away from your system, so but it does not look good when you try to run that. So you see you don't find the dashboard. So you should remember the directory that you are working on. So you have this, and then you can click on, and then I have this Gilal, and I have some program already set up. So if I go to htdocs and I just simply paste it here, so even if I don't have this Gilal, so my first program will automatically run this way. So for example, I write localhost, so I will have all of a sudden, this pop up on the screen. I don't see any index.php, but whenever I write localhost, it brings me out. So one thing, once again, should be remember, if you're working with XAMPP server and you're keeping your files into the main directory, so the server looks for the first file that's got index.php. So if you write index.php or you don't write index.php, it's always that's the file that runs. So what is written into that file, I'm going to explain you a bit later. But you should remember, first of all, you should start your XAMPP server and look for the application. Go to the XAMPP, and into the XAMPP you have htdocs. In the htdocs, any folder that you make will be the directory, and then you can now use anytime you want to use localhost, or sometimes people use this 127.0.1. So this is also the same address. That is the localhost address, which means the server is calling itself. But if your server is not working, this application will not work. Let me show you. Let me show you this way. Give me a second. Okay, so let me select this. Okay. So you see here, so if my server is not working, for instance, if my server is stopped, and then I try to run this. So you see, I cannot find it out because localhost is a place which server is actually taking care of. So if your localhost, sorry, if your server is stopped or not activated, so this is what you're gonna face. So you have to click on start. Once the server is started, now you go and refresh it. You got this. And if you write just localhost, that's perfectly fine. If you write this 127.0.0.1, which is an IP address, you got it. So that's why, like, when you write a facebook.com, it's the name, but in other words, you may have your IP address for this to find it out. So this is one of the ways by which you can install the XAMPP server, install it, run the server, and find out this directory, as I told you, htdocs. And in the htdocs, keep a file. You can keep html files, you can keep javascripting file, you can keep any type of file that you want to store there. So the remember thing is that whenever you have a file, if the file is index.php, it will automatically appear. Otherwise, you have to find it out. For example, if you try to change the name, let's say you try to say index1 and you try to refresh it, so you're not going to find it out. Index.php is no more there because your server looks for the index.php or index.html. So you have to click in manually, but it's not that it's not going to run, it's definitely going to run. But if you wanted to see what going to be the source code for this, so you have something that is just in HTML. So you on a system do not see, because right at the moment I am using this my system as server as well as the client. So I am requesting by myself to myself. So that's why, like, my execution happens somewhere within my system, but when I am getting the response, I am getting a response that is basically an HTML response from the server. So I am anything that I'm seeing on the system, that is a client. So it is like this. So when I explain to you client server, I made this, which means this is the monitor. Monitor means that you sees the output. And when you go to this, though this is my own system, that is the server, sorry, server, but I do not see it. That's why, like, when I see, I only see what is the output of this server's response. So I hope it makes some sense. So let me go to the file that I made, and then I explained you that what was there. So let's double click on it. I am working on, give me a second. Okay, give me a second. I have to share with you again this. Sorry about that. I am working this on this Sublime, so I have to make sure that you see this screen properly. Okay, so give me a second. Yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so if you see, this is my code that I stored there in the file that was called index1.php now. So in this index.php file, I have some information that is related to HTML. So forget about HTML, because HTML is a language that's a markup language, which is just helpful for us to see the, to make the pages which are static. What is static means is that they are always loaded into the client system and they do not change or manipulate themselves, but it's just a markup language which just helps us to see the output and to have some fields or attributes which we use to communicate or pass the data to the server. And server is the language, or server is the place where we can use some dynamic languages, such as PHP is one of the dynamic languages. And I have so many reasons by which I would say that one should be using PHP. For example, it's easy to learn and it's widely adopted. For example, there are based on certain statistics, a 75 percentage of the websites this time, including WordPress website, are using PHP. One of the biggest websites, and you might have heard, is Facebook, is also using PHP. And it's open source, so it's like cost effective. A lot of databases can easily be integrated, and the cross platforms runs on Windows, MacBook, Linux, or so many other types of platform. And because it's a very advanced language, which is based on Perl and other languages, so it has a huge community and it supports object-oriented programming and all those things. And it's scalable, which means good for small or large projects, both of them. And also, it's useful or supports this API like RESTful API, the CMS, the dynamic content. This is like so many things there. And so basically in PHP, what we do is that whenever we try to start the PHP code in HTML or in anywhere, but remember, whenever you have a PHP code, you should have a file type called index1.php. I'm using Mac, so I'm using this editor. So when you go an editor, just go to the new file and then write whatever you wanted to write. For example, now I wanted to make a new file, and then in this new file, I try to save this, with this name called index.php. So when I say index.php, make sure that your file location is htdocs. If you don't have htdocs, it's not gonna, you know, save well there. So once you have htdocs, then you can easily now, embed your PHP. But if you have .html, so your PHP part will not work. It will not execute it at the server. So whatever code that you want to keep in HTML, you always keep with this less than or greater than the delimiters and then PHP. That's where you start. Now, once you start that, you can use echo to print out anything. You can use echo to keep the text within the echo text. I'll explain you slowly everything, but just this is an example that this is the name of a variable that is called $name. So in order to have the variables, you always use $sign and you say name, and then you can keep it whatever you want to keep. So usually in other languages such as Java or C++, you have to mention the data type. For example, a string or characters or numeric or integer. Here you don't. Here you just write name and Abdurrahman Gilal. Exactly the same thing for any number, for example, number, and you say 1, 2, 3, 4. You do not have to have the proper declaration of the variable. So it is like how to say loosely typed, which automatically identifies what type of value it's basically going to come to me. Even if you wanted to typecast it, for example, from the name, you transfer the name into 1, 2, 3. So automatically it changes the value of Abdurrahman from a string to 1, 2, 3, which is numeric or integer. It is no problem at all. And if you wanted to keep everything in a single line, that's also fine. Compiler or server interpreter automatically understands that. But it's a good practice that you should have some indentation so that all code looks fine. And then you can keep the HTML text within the echo. So when you say echo, basically you're trying to say that you are trying to either print out or you want to support some text. For example, here, this is welcome. Let me show you this screen that how it looks like. Okay, give me a second. I have to share with you this one also. Okay. Okay, so if you see here, now I refresh it. So now this is my local host or anything, it's same. So my welcome to web application is basically, coming from H1, which is HTML. So if I wanted to bring this all into here, so what usually I do is that I cut this and I use this here, a call, and I put it here like this way. So now if I don't write echo and just put like this HTML tag, you're gonna see that I have an error. So this error is gonna, let's say, save it and try to run this. So you see you cannot basically do that way because this is not supported. So what you have to do if you are trying to embed some HTML text in your PHP, so you should remember that you should have an echo, and with the help of echo you can easily support those tags. You see, it works exactly the same as you work with HTML, number one. Number two, that if you have any tag, which is, for example, you have any, let's say I have this input type equals to text, which is my field in HTML, which helped me to make a box. So let me show you. And I write Abdul here. Let's say save it and run it. So I don't have any text box here. But when I say input, which means type is text, and I say Abdul, so it basically helps me to print. Now, what if I wanted to print this name in here? So you should remember, in order to print, we use echo. And now I can use the same thing. And I'm gonna put PHP here, and I'm gonna say echo, and I'm gonna say dollar name, and then that's it. And I have to put the semicolon. You should remember that if you don't put the semicolon, you're gonna have a problem. So there you go. So that's all, and this way you will basically embed inline PHP code. So you see here, you have a PHP starting, you see echo, and the name does not die because it's exactly on the same page. So now if you save it and you try to run it, you see you got my name. So what I was trying to explain you, first of all, in order to have the PHP started, you should have this less than question mark and PHP delimits, and then you can use echo to print out anything or support any HTML code. I will explain further HTML takes later in the other video. And in order to save a wholesome values at the local system, so you see I use a variable that is dollar name. I can use dollar destination, and I can use any type of dollar 123. It is naming convention, which is where we should remember that it's gonna create a problem because you can't use name, so variable name with starting with with the numerics. That's why like you have to have this. So once you save it and you run it, this is perfectly fine, which means if I have $n and then M23 whatever, that's okay. So I'll be explaining the further variable things later in the other video, but just to give you a quick understanding that when I wrote this code, whatever you see, so in HTML or without HTML, let's say if I have this one, and if I try to run this, and if I wanted to see what type of code is coming, so you see here, I do not see anything related to, my how to say in PHP, because I am seeing this as an outcome of the response of a server. So here previously I kept this dollar name, but PHP text is not seen, what I meant is that the logic of your code is still hidden. Client only sees what response is produced by the server. So HTML text that's why composed into the echo, so that when the HTML text go to the local system, then the browser will be able to understand HTML. Browser does not understand the PHP text. That's why like here you see H1 is exactly the same, and H1 works perfectly fine when I try to see. So H1 is fine, but when I try to see like where is my dollar variable name, it's not there. So it's clearly telling me that in computes, it provides the complete output, not the process. I hope it makes some sense, but if you have any question, you can ask me. About, yeah, I wanted to tell you that if in my next video, I will try to explain you that how you can actually post your local, your local programs on the web, literally. This is what we call hosting. So stay tuned with me. In the next video, I'll explain you how to bring your developed website on any server, hosting servers. Thank you so much, guys.